The Boys and the Frogs. Some boys, playing near a pond, saw a number of frogs in the water and began to pelt them with stones. They killed several of them, when one of the frogs, lifting his head out of the water, cried out, "Pray stop, my boys. What is sport to you is death to us." The moral of the story: what we do in sport often makes great trouble for others. The Crab and its Mother. A crab said to her son, "Why do you walk so one-sided, my child?" "It's far more becoming to go straight forward," the young crab replied. "Quite true, dear mother. And if you will show me the straight way, I will promise to walk in it." The mother tried in vain and submitted without remonstrance to the reproof of her child. The moral of the story: example is more powerful than precept. The Crow and the Pitcher. A crow, perishing with thirst, saw a pitcher and, hoping to find water, flew to it with great delight. When he reached it, he discovered to his grief that it contained so little water that he could not possibly get at it. He tried everything he could think of to reach the water, but all his efforts were in vain. At last, he collected as many stones as he could carry and dropped them one by one with his beak into the pitcher, until he brought the water within his reach and thus saved his life. The moral of the story: necessity is the mother of invention. The Fox and the Lion. A fox who had never yet seen a lion, when he fell in with him by a certain chance for the first time in the forest, was so frightened that he was near dying with fear. On his meeting with him for the second time, he was still much alarmed, but not to the same extent as at first. On seeing him the third time, he so increased in boldness that he went up to him and commenced a familiar conversation with him. The moral of the story: acquaintance softens prejudices. The Horse and the Stag. The horse had the plain entirely to himself. A stag intruded into his domain and shared his pasture. The horse, desiring to revenge himself on the stranger, requested a man, if he were willing to help him in punishing the stag. The man replied that if the horse would receive a bit in his mouth and agree to carry him, he would contrive very effectual weapons against the stag. The horse consented and allowed the man to mount him. From that hour, he found that instead of obtaining revenge on the stag, he had enslaved himself to the service of men. The moral of the story: he who seeks to injure others often injures only himself. The Lion and the Mouse. A lion was awakened from sleep by a mouse running over his face. Rising up in anger, he caught him and was about to kill him, when the mouse piteously entreated, saying, "If you would only spare my life, I would be sure to repay your kindness." The lion laughed and let him go. It happened shortly after this that the lion was caught by some hunters, who bound him by strong ropes to the ground. The mouse, recognizing his roar, came up and gnawed the rope with his teeth, and setting him free, exclaimed, You ridiculous the idea of my ever being able to help you, not expecting to receive from me any repayment of your favor. But now you know that it's possible for even a mouse to confer benefits on a lion. The moral of the story: no one is too weak to do good. The Lioness. A controversy prevailed among the beasts of the field as to which of the animals deserved the most credit for producing the greatest number of whelps at a birth. They rushed clamorously into the presence of the lioness, and demanded of her the settlement of the dispute. "And you," they said, "how many sons have you at a birth?" The lioness laughed at them and said, "Why, I have only one, but that one is altogether a thoroughbred lion." The value is in the worth, not in the number. The milkmaid and her pot of milk. A maid was carrying her pail of milk to the farmhouse when she fell a musing. "The money for which this milk will be sold will buy at least 300 eggs. The eggs, allowing for all mishaps, will produce 250 chickens. The chickens will become ready for market when poultry will fetch the highest price, so that by the end of the year I shall have money enough to buy a new gun. In this dress I will go to the Christmas junketings, when all the young fellows will propose to me, but I will toss my head and refuse them everyone." At this moment she tossed her head in unison with her thoughts, when down fell the milk pot to the ground, and broke into 100 pieces, and all her fine sheens perished in a moment. Count not your chickens before they are hatched. The mischievous dog. A dog used to run up quietly to the heels of those he met, and to bite them without notice. His master sometimes suspended a bell about his neck, that he might give notice of his presence wherever he went, and sometimes he fastened a chain about his neck, to which was attached a heavy clog, so that he could not be quick at biting people's heels. The dog grew proud of his bell and clog, and went with them all over the marketplace. An old hound said to him, "Why do you make such an exhibition of yourself? That bell and clog that you carry are not, believe me, orders of merit, but on the contrary, marks of disgrace, a public notice to all men to avoid you as an ill-mannered dog." Those who achieve notoriety often mistake it for fame. The monkey and the dolphin. A sailor, bound on a long voyage, took with him a monkey to amuse him while on shipboard. As he sailed off the coast of Greece, a violent tempest arose, in which the ship was wrecked, and he, his monkey, and all the crew were obliged to swim for their lives. A dolphin saw the monkey contending with the waves, and supposing him to be a man whom he is always said to befriend, came and placed himself under him, to convey him on his back in safety to the shore. When the dolphin arrived with his burden in sight of land not far from Athens, he demanded of the monkey if he were an Athenian, who answered that he was, and that he was descended from one of the noblest families in the city. The dolphin then inquired if he knew the Piraeus, the famous harbor of Athens. The monkey supposed that a man was meant, and being obliged to support his previous lie, answered that he knew him very well, and that he was an intimate friend, who would no doubt be very glad to see him. The dolphin, indignant at these falsehoods, dipped the monkey under the water and drowned him. He who once begins to tell falsehoods is obliged to tell others to make them appear true, and sooner or later they will get him into trouble. The Old Man and the Three Young Men. As an old man was planting a tree, 3 young men came along and began to make sport of him, saying, "It shows your foolishness to be planting a tree at your age. The tree cannot bear fruit for many years, while you must very soon die. What is the use of your wasting your time in providing pleasure for others to share long after you're dead?" The old man stopped in his labor and replied, "Others before me provided for my happiness, and it's my duty to provide for those who shall come after me. As for life, who is sure of it for a day? You may all die before me." The old man's words came true. One of the young men went on a voyage at sea and was drowned. Another went to war and was shot, and the third fell from a tree and broke his neck. We should not think wholly of ourselves, and we should remember that life is uncertain. The Raven and the Swan. A raven saw a swan and desired to secure for himself a like beauty of plumage. Supposing that his splendid white color arose from his washing in the water in which he swam, the raven left the altars in the neighborhood, of which he picked up his living, and took up his abode in the lakes and pools. But cleansing his feathers as often as he would, he could not change their color, while through want of food he perished. Change of habit cannot alter nature. The Shepherd and the Wolf. A shepherd once found a young wolf and brought it up, and after a while taught it to steal lambs from the neighboring flocks. The wolf, having shown himself as an apt pupil, said to the shepherd, "Since you have taught me to steal, you must keep a sharp lookout, or you will lose some of your own flock." The moral of the story: the vices we teach may be practiced against us. The Stag, the Wolf, and the Sheep. A stag asked the sheep to lend him a measure of wheat, and said that the wolf would be his surety. The sheep, fearing some fraud was intended, excused herself, saying, "The wolf is accustomed to seize what he wants and to run off, and you too can quickly outstrip me in your rapid flight. How then shall I be able to find you when the day of payment comes?" Two blacks do not make one white. The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. A country mouse invited a town mouse, an intimate friend, to pay him a visit and partake of his country fare. As they were on the bare ploughlands, eating their wheat stalks and root pulled up from the hedgerow, the town mouse said to his friend, "You live here the life of the ants, while in my house is the horn of plenty. I'm surrounded with every luxury, and if you will come with me, as I much wish you would, you shall have an ample share of my dainties." The country mouse was easily persuaded, and returned to town with his friend. On his arrival, the town mouse placed before him bread, barley, beans, dried figs, honey, raisins, and last of all, brought a dainty piece of cheese from a basket. The country mouse, being much delighted at the sight of such good cheer, expressed his satisfaction in warm terms, and lamented his own hard fate. Just as they were beginning to eat, someone opened the door, and they both ran off squeaking as fast as they could to a hole so narrow that two could only find room in it by squeezing. They had scarcely again begun their repast when someone else entered to take something out of a cupboard, on which the two mice, more frightened than before, ran away and hid themselves. At last the country mouse, almost famished, thus addressed his friend. "Although you have prepared for me so dainty a feast, I must leave you to enjoy it by yourself. It's surrounded by too many dangers to please me." The moral of the story: better a little in safety than an abundance surrounded by danger. The vain jackdaw. Jupiter determined, it said, to create a sovereign over the birds, and made proclamation that, on a certain day, they should all present themselves before him, when he would himself choose the most beautiful among them to be king. The jackdaw, knowing his own ugliness, searched through the woods and fields, and collected the feathers which had fallen from the wings of his companions, and stuck them in all parts of his body. When the appointed day arrived, and the birds had assembled before Jupiter, the jackdaw also made his appearance in his many-feathered finery. On Jupiter proposing to make him king, on account of the beauty of his plumage, the birds indignantly protest, and each plucking from him his own feathers, the jackdaw was again nothing but a jackdaw. Hope not to succeed in borrowed plumes. The Wolf and the Sheep. A wolf, being sick and maimed, called to a sheep who was passing, and asked him to fetch some water from the stream. "For," he said, "if you will bring me drink, I will find means to provide myself with meat." "Yes," said the sheep, "if I should bring you the draught, you would doubtless make me provide the meat also." The moral of the story: hypocritical speeches are easily seen.